What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, retired, undefeated, Hall of Famer, former Olympic gold medalist, former pound-for-pound king, turned colorful analyst, and boxing pundit for ESPN and Top Rank Boxing, Andre S.O.G. Ward. He retired 32-0, 16 wins by way of knockout. He retired back in 2017 after his second fight and dominating performance over then Sergey Crusher Kovalev, who was seen as the boogeyman in the light heavyweight division. That was in June of 2017. Andre Ward, he retired, 4 years ago now, okay? With that said, Andre Ward is about 36, 37 years old. And Andre Ward, he had a lot of injuries, which prevented Andre Ward from continuing to move forward with his career. Okay, I believe that the boxing fans, the boxing world, the boxing pundits, we were shortchanged by Andre Ward's career because injuries, I believe, shortchanged us and himself. Now, he's guaranteed Hall of Famer. He won the Super 6 tournament. He beat some world champions. He was the pound-for-pound king at one point in time after Floyd Mayweather retired. He essentially passed the torch to Andre Ward as the pound-for-pound king in the sport of boxing. He retired undefeated. Like I said, 32 wins, no losses, 16 wins by way of knockout. So Andre Ward is 37 years of age. With that said, Andre Ward was asked about, the current landscape of the sport of boxing today and what he thinks about what's considered the face of the sport of boxing. That is 4-division world champion, who is currently the unified WBC WBA super middleweight world champion, Mexican superstar boxer Saul Canelo Alvarez. Andre Ward was asked, nobody sees Canelo Alvarez getting beat by this landscape of fighters. Do you think that you had the necessary skills to beat a Saul Canelo Alvarez? Okay, do you have what it takes to beat Canelo Alvarez? Because we don't see the current landscape beating Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez is 54 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws on his resume, 36 wins by way of knockout. He's currently fighting this Saturday against Abney Yildirim, who is his former sparring partner. Canelo Alvarez is 30 years of age, so he's 7 years younger than Andre Ward. He's 5'8" with a 70-inch arm reach. He's facing Abney Yildirim. He's on the quest to become undisputed at super middleweight, 168. This is the division that Andre Ward reigned at. Okay, this is where he made his money at. This is where he made his name at 168. And so, seeing as though Canelo Alvarez is on the verge of dominating this division, everybody wants to know, is Andre Ward capable of beating Canelo Alvarez? He's still a tender age of 37 years old. We know Floyd Mayweather, he beat Canelo Alvarez when he was 37 years of age, okay? So with that said, Andre Ward is being asked that if he thinks he could beat Canelo Alvarez. And he says, absolutely. He says, for one, I don't believe any boxer could beat me. He says, but I don't believe that Canelo Alvarez could beat me. Or I don't doubt that I could beat Canelo Alvarez. He says that I have the skill set, the reach, the size to beat Canelo Alvarez, and the experience, right? Andre Ward don't know how to lose. Canelo Alvarez, he struggled with the skill set of Floyd Mayweather. That's the one loss on his resume. But he also struggled with the skill set of Erislandy Lara and the movement and the boxing ability of Erislandy Lara, okay? So he lost to Floyd Mayweather. That was back in 2013. That was 7 years ago, okay? Canelo Alvarez, 23 years old. Floyd Mayweather was 37 years old, okay? Floyd Mayweather is 44 right now. So, but then he had a draw with Gennady Triple G Golovkin, and Golovkin was moving a lot, very big guy, but I thought personally that, Canelo Alvarez won that fight. Gennady Golovkin, 41 wins, 1 loss. He stands at 5'10.5" with a 70-inch arm reach, okay? And that seemed to give Canelo Alvarez some problems, right? Floyd Mayweather's boxing ability gave Canelo Alvarez some problems. Guys with quick feet and educated feet and good foot movement give Canelo Alvarez problems because he has very fast hands. He bends at the waist defensively. He slips punches. He's slippery, but his feet are slow, okay? He has very, very slow feet, and he's very, very flat-footed. He has power, but he's very flat-footed. And at times he could be somewhat predictable, especially when you're dealing with a high quality, high-skilled boxer with a high ring IQ that can move their feet and have quick hands and are athletic. So that gives Canelo Alvarez problems as it would give anybody problems, okay? So with that said, Andre Ward's skill set would be far too much for Canelo Alvarez, and Andre Ward lets it be known, Canelo Alvarez, if this is the only fight that would bring him out of retirement, and he stated that, but if Canelo Alvarez called him out, this would bring him out of retirement, and he says, but Canelo Alvarez knows better than to call me out. Andre Ward stands at 6 feet tall with a 71-inch arm reach. To be a guy that's 6 feet tall, he has a pretty short arm reach, okay? You would think that his arm reach was longer. Floyd Mayweather's at 5'8" and has a 72-inch arm reach. Terrence Crawford is at 5'8" with a 74-inch arm reach. Andre Ward, 6 feet tall. He's 4 inches taller, 3 inches taller than both of them, and he has a 71-inch arm reach. So he doesn't have extremely long arms for his height, but he knows how to use his abilities, okay? So he stated that this is the only fight that will bring him out of retirement if Canelo Alvarez was to call him out. He says, if Canelo Alvarez calls me out, I'm coming out of retirement, right? And he says, but Canelo Alvarez knows better, essentially letting it be known that he knows that if he calls me out, he's going to take an L. And I agree with Andre Ward. Andre Ward is very, very skilled. Andre Ward is very, very accurate. Andre Ward has very great timing. He judges distance very, very well. Andre Ward has very, very quick, educated feet, and he has power. So that would spell disaster for Canelo Alvarez. And he's longer. He's at 6 feet tall. Canelo Alvarez is at 5'8", 5'7" at best, okay? Andre Ward has a 71-inch arm reach. Canelo Alvarez has a 70-inch arm reach. So Andre Ward has an arm reach advantage. Andre Ward is a quicker athlete. And I know people are going to say, well, Andre Ward had knee injuries, right? Andre Ward had injuries, shoulder injuries, knee injuries. Well, Andre Ward is smart enough to know what it takes. Believe you me, Andre Ward has been studying Canelo Alvarez. He knows what it takes to offset what Canelo Alvarez does great for himself to be successful. So I would highly expect Andre Ward to dominate Canelo Alvarez. So with that said, I believe that Andre Ward is getting the itch to come back, and he sees that this is his division, right? He stays in shape as well. If you didn't notice, Andre Ward, he's been working out again. He says that it's just, he's just doing his due diligence for his health and his body, as he gets older. But I believe Andre Ward is definitely getting the itch. It's almost impossible for a guy that's still this young. He retired 4 years ago, and he's only 37, so he retired at 33 years of age, okay? Andre Ward is still very young. He could still be active. The only reason that stopped Andre Ward from continuing and resuming his career was the injuries. So I believe that Andre Ward, especially with technology today and the medicine today, that Andre Ward could definitely make his ring return, especially for a fight or two, okay? I believe Andre Ward would want to take a tune-up fight just to get his feet wet and then go into the Canelo Alvarez fight, okay? Because it's been 4 years since he was out the ring. But a guy like Andre Ward, he gets back in the groove. Andre Ward, gets the oiling up the joints. Andre Ward, man, gets the hit in the heavy bag and, breaking the sweat. I believe Canelo Alvarez will be in trouble. I believe that Andre Ward would stop Canelo Alvarez because Andre Ward understands how to break a fighter down. He's very, very technical in the ring. He can make Canelo Alvarez miss even at this advanced age. And he's stronger than Canelo Alvarez, okay? Andre Ward will go take the Canelo Alvarez's body. See, he's not going to be hesitant. A lot of fighters are hesitant to go to Canelo Alvarez's body because he's quick. His hands are quick, and he can counter you. So if you go reach to his body, he'll counter you. And he puts combinations together very well. Andre Ward understands the distance. Andre Ward understands his timing, okay? So Andre Ward, once he computes Canelo Alvarez's timing and hand speed, he will start going to his body. He will start changing levels, going from upstairs to downstairs, meaning to the body to the head, and vice versa, from the head to the body. He would start selling traps, and I believe he would dominate Canelo Alvarez. I think that's a huge style bad matchup for Canelo Alvarez. And I believe, like Andre Ward says, he knows better than to call me out because he understands what he's up against. And I agree with Andre Ward wholeheartedly, okay? And Andre Ward has power. We saw how he eventually broke down the bigger man in Sergey Kovalev. He made the adjustments. In the first fight, it was a very close fight. Sergey Kovalev, he dropped Andre Ward in that fight. Andre Ward, once he computed the distance and understand Sergey Kovalev's speed and got his timing down, he started to find weaknesses in Sergey Kovalev, and it started to break Sergey Kovalev down. And in the second fight, we saw that he understood what it took to beat Sergey Kovalev. He won the first fight via decision, but in the second fight, he stopped Sergey Kovalev because he computed what it took to break Sergey Kovalev down completely, and he did so by going to the body and changing levels on him, being very, very accurate. So he dominated Sergey Kovalev in his second fight. With that said, we know Canelo Alvarez, he moved up to 175, and he stopped Sergey Kovalev as well. And I believe that gives a lot of fans, a lot of boxing pundits, false hope that he could do the same with Andre Ward, because he cannot do the same with Andre Ward. He's just too skilled. He's far more skilled than Sergey Kovalev, okay? And he don't rely on his power and his jab. And Sergey Kovalev's jab was giving Canelo Alvarez problems that entire fight. And he wasn't even assertive. He wasn't asserting himself. He didn't seem to want to throw anything with bad intentions, to prevent Canelo Alvarez from coming forward or stopping him or anything of that nature. He just seemed reluctant to do so. That won't be the case when you're dealing with Andre Ward. Andre Ward will start breaking Canelo Alvarez down, and he's a different animal than even Floyd Mayweather, because, see, Floyd Mayweather was just piling up points and taking Canelo Alvarez to school. No, Andre Ward going to pile up points. He's going to take him to school, and then he's going to teach him a lesson for even coming to that school without having the proper paperwork. So with that said, Andre Ward, I believe he would end up stopping Canelo Alvarez. He will break Canelo Alvarez down. This is the first time you would see Canelo Alvarez in very, very vulnerable positions. And I believe that this will ultimately change the trajectory on Canelo Alvarez's career if he took this fight. It's not going to be like the loss to Floyd Mayweather. It's not going to be like those two fights with Gennady Triple G Golovkin. It's going to be a completely different animal because Andre Ward is a closer. So with that said, I believe Canelo Alvarez understands that, don't call out Andre Ward. And see, I know Andre Ward's getting the itch because, see, these are the two divisions he dominated, 168 and 175. And now you got a guy that's reigning in this division with a huge name. When he was at 168, Canelo Alvarez or Gennady Golovkin would not dare to come up to 68. Okay? And as soon as he exited, now everybody wants to, dibble and dabble in 168 and 175 as soon as Andre Ward left. There was no possible talks. When there was talks of Gennady Golovkin, he made every excuse as to why he's staying at 160. And to his defense, Gennady Triple G Golovkin, he stayed at 160. He's not moved up or moved down. Canelo Alvarez is moving through the divisions. And now Andre Ward, this is a huge name. This would be an even bigger fight for Andre Ward than the Sergey Kovalev fight. This is the legacy. He hadn't had, the Sergey Kovalev fight was massive, but this would be over the top pay-per-view wise for Andre Ward. And I know he's getting that itch because, he believes he could do it. He trusts himself. He's confident in himself. And he sees the holes in Canelo Alvarez's game. Believe that. And he's young enough to do it. So let's see how this unfolds and plays out. I would love to see this fight. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed? Hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button. Hit the bell icon to get all the new notifications. Follow me on Instagram at Blood Sports TV. All one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to New Media. Shout out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share these videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.